What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN Offseason. I'm Jude, that's Ethan. And Ethan, this is going to be one of the last few SSPN off seasons that we do for the 2025 cycle because today is position breakdowns. We're only a couple weeks away from the NBA preseason starting. And of course, once the NBA preseason starts in October, that will be the month. That'll mean we're only 22 days away from the season opener against Dallas. So really, if you think about it, on the 17th of September, Ethan, we're really only about a month out from the regular season. So it's time to jump into all of that, man. And I'm really excited. But before we get into all of the guards this season, and if you've watched in years past, we've gone point guard, shooting guard, small forwards, power forward, center. This year, we're just going to go guards, wings, and bigs for the next 3 weeks to lead into preseason. But again, like I said, but before we get into the guards today, which will be point guards and shooting guards, we do have a little bit of Spurs news to go over, Ethan. The first thing I'll go over is a little bit more just fun and lighthearted, and that is Wemby appearing in the new season of Futurama. If you guys didn't see the clip on Twitter, go to Jeff G Spurs Zone's account. He posted the whole minute and a half long clip of his cameo appearance in the show. And I grew up on Futurama. They just kind of released the new season on Hulu, which was a little bit of a reboot. So that was super cool to see, Ethan. And the context of his appearance is pretty funny. I won't spoil it too much. Y'all should definitely go check it out on Hulu or Twitter. But the thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about this is just Wemby's ever-growing presence in pop culture and media. I feel like we're going to see more type of stuff like this. We're just out of nowhere. He's on a TV show and he looks like an alien and, he's kind of playing into the brand that he's building. I think this was just kind of, one of the first instances of that. But what are your thoughts on his appearance and also just kind of his future, kind of in this realm, if you will?
Yeah, it was a really funny clip. First of all, I like Futurama. It's a pretty funny show. I'm glad that he did Futurama before he did something kind of obvious like The Simpsons or Family Guy. Those are the big ones. I feel like
Right.
everybody does. But Futurama lets me know that Wemby knows ball. He knows good comedy TV. But it's exciting, as a Spurs fan because historically we really haven't had anybody other than Iceman that's out there like this
Yeah.
doing pop culture appearances and cameos. So for Wemby to be on that level already before he's really done anything in the league is speaks volumes to the kind of aura that he already has at such a young age.
And, kind of one of the names or one of the reasons that we have the name that we do is because we felt like the Spurs didn't get enough coverage from national media.
Right.
I think with Wemby, that problem's going to be solved, not just on the court, but also off the court, as we're seeing with this appearance in Futurama.
100%.
Yeah, and also got to throw in, just with that Area 51 and the alien stuff, that's another great tie-in for him to
Yeah.
be on Futurama specifically.
Yeah, honestly.
But again, y'all should definitely go check out the clip because it's pretty funny. It kind of has to do with jokes about height. If you know the character Bender, he's trying to get in the dating scene, and I think you guys can already pick up the pieces on where that one's going. So it was definitely pretty funny, and y'all should check it out. But getting to on-court news, Ethan, stuff that affects the Spurs roster. We have another person on the roster, Ethan. After the past 2 weeks, basically since the start of September with our last 3 episodes, we've been like, well, we don't have this, this open roster spot still here. Guess we're going to go into the season with it and have some flexibility. And naturally, as soon as we came to that conclusion, Ethan, in Spurs fashion, the next week, we went ahead and re-signed our guy, Bismack Biyombo. So for those of you guys listening on podcast, we have our 2025-26 roster outlook up on YouTube, so y'all can come check that out to see what we're talking about there. But the roster is full and complete, Ethan. But before we get into just kind of the overall picture, what are your thoughts on Bismack coming back to SA for a year?
Dude, I love Bismack Biyombo. We joked about it, lightheartedly, but in all honesty, I don't think either of us would have been upset if he had been probably the third string. Maybe we would have been slightly upset had he been the
Yeah.
predominant backup center. But at this point, he's basically a fourth string. He's basically what Gorgie Zhang was Gorgie's last year of his career here, to just kind of be a mentor piece, an emergency center. And we saw what he was able to do last year with limited time. Still pretty effective at his age. Limited athletically, obviously. I think he's still only 6'9", 6'10",
Yeah.
but he
6'8"
plays,
even.
yeah, 6'8". He plays way bigger than that, obviously, even with his limited athleticism. So I'm cool with it. I think it provides continuity, veteran leadership, obviously. And let's be honest, dude, he might not make it through training camp. There is a possibility that Gorgie's only here for for a short time, a fun time, not a long time.
That is very true. I will say Paul Garcia, I used to work for Project Spurs, now does his own independent thing, the spot up shot. He was saying that his read on it was he might think that probably the training camp guys like Micah Potter, Stanley Amude, and Adam Flagler would have less of a chance to get on the roster. But
Mm,
with Bismack's age, as well as, we kind of talked about how he was basically retired before we called him up,
mhm.
last spring. I definitely think that that's something to keep in mind. If there's an injury that pops up or something, there could be a little bit of you just never know with a
Mhm.
guy like Bismack. But obviously, I hope that he comes into the season. It's not like it's just this is
Okay.
someone who's been playing consistently, for forever. So
For
I hear
sure.
you there. But yeah, man, for me, whenever it comes to Bismack, I'm just glad we have center depth. We have competent center depth. Like you mentioned, he's kind of a de facto fourth string because we'd probably play Kelly Olynyk there, in the
Mhm.
event of injury before that. But here's the thing, man. I was thinking about this today, Ethan, and I'm gonna play out this scenario for you. Okay, let's say the Spurs get into the first round of the playoffs, whether that's through the sixth seed, you know what I mean, or the play-in. It doesn't matter, right? And Luke Cornett, he's been physical for us all year. He's really helping us in the paint, doing all the things that we felt like Zach Collins wasn't for us, you know
Mhm.
what I mean, over the past couple years. And, he's fighting for a board in that first round. It's game 2 or 3. And there's two guys crashing on him because he's a big body trying to fight with him. And he falls down and he hits his ankle or he bangs up his knee. And it's not a serious injury, but, he's out for the game or maybe two, right?
Mhm.
If this was last year, this would be, Sinner Sohan time. You know what I mean? Or Harrison Barnes or freaking Keldon. You know what I mean? Those would be our options. Maybe even
Right.
Champagny or Mamu, right? Mamu probably would have been the option in this situation. Now we
Mhm.
can bring in Bismack and actually have like a real true center, even in like a disaster scenario like that. And obviously, it's going to take a little bit. You probably need multiple injuries to get to that point, but still, it's something that could happen. And again, like we've mentioned as well, there's going to be nights where Wemby rests inevitably. And if that coincides with the time that like Kelly Olynyk's dealing with something, this allows us to still have competent rotations and not have to throw some forward on like Zach Edey. As much as I've used that example forever, I just that image of Jeremy Sohan like on
Yeah.
Zach Edey just sticks in my head. But whatever center, who's 7 foot plus, like you said, Bismack Biyombo is undersized for a center, but he plays a lot bigger than his height, and he's like a true center. We're not throwing a wing out there, trying to play a true big.
Right. He's not going to do too much either. I mean, I think he's a perfect fourth string. And to your point, when you look at the overall roster holistically, the thing, Jude, that stands out to me is exactly what you said with the center position. It's depth. And when you
Right.
look at the playoffs and you look at the teams that had success late in the year, they had multiple guys at different positions with lots of versatility. I think for the first time, we got nights, Jude, where we can have third stringers playing meaningful minutes, maybe even in the starting lineup, where we feel like we have a real shot at winning the game. When's the last time we really felt like that? You know what I mean? If there was one injury
Absolutely.
to our starting lineup last year or the year before, it's like, all right, well, let's just hope we see some meaningful things from some of our young guys.
Right.
This year, I think it's back to the old school way of thinking with the Spurs, where it's like next man up, let's go get the win. It doesn't matter who's starting at 2 or 3. If Julian Champagny's getting meaningful minutes, it doesn't matter. Lindy Waters, for that
Right.
matter. It's time to get a win.
It's so funny you mentioned that because while you were saying that, what I was thinking is now we have contingency plans for
Hmm.
winning. And as I pulled up the roster, man, I don't want to go too, spoiling what we're going to say in our position breakdowns here. But since we're on the topic, I'll go ahead and say it. Our third stringers, if you just look at them overall, I mean, it's a significant upgrade in comparison to last year. I mean, we love our boy Mamu, and he had a ton of great games out there, but unequivocally, a Carter Bryant is going to have a higher ceiling than Sandro.
Hmm.
Julian was a guy who started for us last year and consistently played rotation minutes. And, you could maybe even argue that he's in a competition with guys
Hmm.
like Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson for minutes. That's just how we have it listed, on the spreadsheet that we have right there. But again, like I said, and like you said, a player who had like significant rotation minutes for us this year could potentially be a third stringer. And like you said, a contingency plan, and a plug and play during injuries. Same with Lindy Waters. Same with Jordan McLaughlin, who also has playoff experience. And we're not trying to say these guys are world beaters, but it's a
Hmm.
lot different than Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, and I hate to say it, Dom Barlow. You know what I mean?
1000%. And I think back about those days, G, where we were consistently in the playoffs and going to the finals. Regular season, Spurs would play David Ayers, you
Right.
know, starting center for like a 3-game stretch. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Matt Bonner would start, and then we get to playoff time. Obviously, those guys wouldn't necessarily see the floor, um, but that's just kind of how Spurs have built. This legacy is on the entire team. It's not just 5 guys, not just 9 guys. It's 15 total guys on a roster.
Absolutely, Ethan. And we officially have 15 total guys on the roster with the Bismack Biyombo signing. So, any final thoughts on the roster as a whole before we get into these position breakdowns here, Ethan?
I'm just excited to get some wins, Jude. Excited.
Me too. I am just excited, like we said, to have like competent rotations, even in the event of injury, and we're prepared for it in our roster building, which is
Hmm.
so nice to see. But with all that being said, Ethan, it's time to get into the nitty gritty, the stuff that I feel like the first year we did this show, we did this channel was position breakdowns. That was really like the first kind of segment that
Hmm.
we did. So I'm excited to get back to it as the Spurs try to get back to their winning ways, and that starts, Ethan, with De'Aaron Fox, one of the 2 players on this Spurs roster who has been to an NBA All-Star game. As once again, our formatting here is just a little bit out of whack. But man, let me go ahead and pull up De'Aaron Fox's stats from his entire career as well as last season. So last season, averaged 6.3 assists, 4.8 rebounds, and 23.5 points. In San Antonio, that was 19 points, 6.8 assists, as well as 4.3 rebounds on 27% shooting from 3 and 44% shooting overall from the field. Now, obviously, there is some context there, Ethan. We got De'Aaron in the middle of the season. We only got a handful of games of what the team is like actually
Hmm.
going to look like. With De'Aaron Fox on the floor, he only got to play a handful of games with Wemby. I've talked about this at nauseum. I feel like if you watched last season, it really kind of felt like De'Aaron's intensity level maybe wasn't always at 100%. And I feel like his last game of the season against the Dallas Mavericks, where he went for 32, 9, and 11, is really an example, as Winky is here
Saying hello.
is saying hello, is really an example of how last season, like in the games prior to that Mavericks game, post Wemby injury, he wasn't, the intensity level wasn't as high as I think it can be for him. And when he did turn it on in what was his last game of the season, where he wanted to send the home crowd out with the win, he went off, took over that game, and got us a win. I'm not saying De'Aaron Fox is going to get us a 30-point triple double every night, Ethan, but I do think that the version of him that we saw last year, with kind of the stats drop off that you can see from his time in Sacramento to San Antonio throughout last season, where he had 25 points in Sacramento, 5 rebounds there. It's really just mainly the shooting percentage drop off from 3, as well as scoring overall, with 32% from 3 in Sacramento at the beginning of the year. And again, 25 points. Obviously, him learning the roster also has a big component to this as well. But again, there was a lot of context to what we saw from De'Aaron Fox last season. As much as there were, games where he unequivocally shot bad, like I said, to get back to that Mavericks game, as much as that stat line may not be what it is for him every night, I think that level of intensity is what we're going to see from De'Aaron this season, not just individually, but also like knowing his teammates more, being able to hold them accountable a little bit more because he's built that relationship with them over the season, as well as just being more cohesive with them and knowing them more. So we're like, he can have confidence in things he's doing on the court because he knows where guys are placed.
100%. Chemistry and confidence are very, very important factors that you can't necessarily measure, but when you see it, you know it. And I think the switch point that you made when he was playing competitively and when he was kind of coasting, you could absolutely tell if you were watching the games. If you didn't watch the games, I could see how you'd look at the numbers and think, "Oh my goodness, he had a huge drop off." But then you have to also think about the context of his injury as well as his shooting hand. He had a finger problem all season long, and it just continued to get exacerbated as the season went on, exacerbated, excuse me. But he also took 3 less shots per game when he was with the Spurs versus with Sacramento last year, Jude. And he
Mm-hmm.
played 3 less minutes a game on, I think, what you could call a less competitive overall roster. I know Sacramento wasn't great, but they at least had guys that were, competitive veteran level
DeMar
players like
DeRozan,
Domantas
Zach
Sabonis, uh, and
Levine.
Zach was a part of the trade. He didn't play with
My
Zach.
bad. Thank
No,
you.
you're good. But point taken. Like it was a team that had playoff aspirations. They weren't that great, but that was the level of teammate that he had in Sacramento. And when he got to San Antonio, he had Wemby for a couple weeks, and then Wemby was gone. So I would anticipate averaging in the low 20s, probably not to 25, but I would also think he's probably going to average a career high in assists. He averaged 7 assists in the 2020-2021 season with Sacramento. I think he's probably going to get closer to that 8 mark in San Antonio because he's got so many athletic wings around him. He's got Victor Wembanyama, probably his. I don't want to disrespect Domantas Sabonis, but I
Right.
think Victor's a better pick and roll partner than Domantas Sabonis because
Well,
of his sheer length and athleticism. He's a lob threat where Domantas was more so a high post, pinch post action kind of guy. And with the Spurs system, with all of the fluid motion, he's going to have a field day as the predominant ball handler in the San Antonio offense.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you touched on a ton of things there with De'Aaron. And like I mentioned when I set up all the context, I don't mean to just repeatedly bring that up, but I just really do think, not just with the roster, but again, with him individually, it's just going to be a different version for
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that you talked about. You mentioned the assists. Like, if he doesn't really know what sets we're running, or he's just learning them, and learning, how guys move on the court as well, and knowing where they're at, that's something that can increase your assist numbers, once you
Mm-hmm.
learn those things and have an off season, training with those guys. But just to kind of give you my thoughts on De'Aaron and expectations for this season, I wrote down about 5, or it's up to 6 now. I thought it was 5, 6 bullet points for him this year. The first thing I have is just taking over games and imposing himself. Obviously, I harped on that a lot already. So that intensity in that Mavericks game, I want to see that, in every game throughout the season. And I think he obviously has that intrinsic motivation to do that. And another thing I want to mention about last year too, we were kind of soft tanking after the Wemby injury.
100%.
And that's it rewarded us with Dylan Harper. Whether that was an NBA lottery rig, who knows? But we'll take it regardless. But getting back to De'Aaron, I think that was another factor of him like not going 100% as well. I think he kind of knew the underlying goal for the team too. So with that out of the way, I think he will impose himself a lot more, and you won't see as much of that. Now, if you do, then I will be like, okay, I do have some intensity questions for De'Aaron Fox, but I really don't anticipate that being the case personally, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I think about when I think about De'Aaron Fox and kind of what he can bring to this team, Ethan, dude, think about the past 2 years, right? There's been so many times where a team has gone on a 7-0 run, an 8-0 run, and that snowballs into a 21-4 or a 17-5, something like that. But we're not able to stop the bleeding in these runs. It's like an
Mm-hmm.
avalanche or, a rock slide or something. I feel like De'Aaron Fox isolation buckets during those times, or even in a pick and roll with Wemby, whatever it may be, but just in those runs by opposing teams, I think him getting a bucket, like I said, in less of like an orchestrated set and just beating somebody off the dribble, hitting a step back, creating himself, or like I said, whether that's a quick pick and pop or pick and roll with Wemby, something in that scenario, whenever a team is on a 7-8-0 run, him hitting a bucket there and stopping the bleeding during those opposing
Mm-hmm.
team runs and not letting it domino and snowball, I think that's something that he 100% has the ability to do. And I think if we didn't have Victor's injury at the end of last year, or his deep vein thrombosis, if you want to call it a physical injury, I think that we would have saw a lot more of that. We would have been able to see a lot more examples. But when you take Wemby off the floor, it was just kind of a tough ask to even, see that when you think about the context of the roster last season. So that's another thing for him. Obviously, I mentioned the other thing I had written down, Wemby and Fox, PNR, PNP, the 2-man game. I mentioned that already. Everybody's going to be excited for that. We only got like 5 games of that last year. I want to see it in full force with full intensity. And again, an off season of chemistry building. And then defensively, I think he kind of got a little bit of a bad rap. I think he gets a bad rap overall for where he's at defensively. And he had multiple games last season with multiple steals. So like, that's an example of how he's not bad on defense. Like, he's making plays, he's making an impact. But if I did have to say, here's a way, like, here's how I can criticize something to where he can be, great, not just good. I think physical ball pressure on defense,
Mm.
just putting his chest into guys a little bit more. I didn't see that as much. And again, I think the intensity stuff and the context of last season ties into a lot of that as well. But I would like to see that. And I feel like, if I'm being honest, like, I probably haven't seen that too much from De'Aaron in his career. I've definitely seen steals. I've seen steals since he was since he was at Kentucky. That's why they
Right.
call him Swipe with a Fox. But physical, just ball pressure, in man-to-man defense, and one-on-one situations, that's something I would like to see a little bit more with De'Aaron. And, maybe a
Mhm.
summer in the Spurs defensive training camp can emphasize that a little bit more. And then the last two things I have, Ethan, and I'll dish it back to you to wrap up on De'Aaron, is just shooting with the finger surgery. Interested to see what impact is there. And then vocal leadership. I think we saw, maybe like a handful of times where he did that last season. But I think this year, again, with getting that, full off season of comfortability with the guys, getting to know them and everything, I think we'll be able to see a little bit more of his vocal leadership this season, as one of the more tenured guys on the roster. And I would hope that would increase.
That's a really good point. It'll be interesting to see how he, in a competitive situation like this, how he gels with the rest of the team. Because last year, obviously, all the context he talked about didn't really have a chance to. We saw that obviously they get along, at least on paper, what comes
Right.
across on social media. But how's that going to translate when you get on the court and you got 2 minutes left and you're down by six? You know what I mean? What's that going to look like?
Absolutely.
That'll be interesting to watch.
100%. Any final thoughts on De'Aaron before we move on here, Ethan?
No, I'm extremely hopeful for De'Aaron Fox. I don't know if you saw this report. I don't know how much validity there was, but I saw on Twitter a couple weeks ago the Spurs are set that De'Aaron Fox is the running mate for Victor Wembanyama for the foreseeable future. And I think that was, if that's true, if they actually did say that, which I don't see why they wouldn't say that. To me, that feels like the Spurs telling the rest of the league, we're not trading him. So stop bringing that up in national media. Like this is our guy. Even though we drafted Dylan Harper, this is our guy. So that's interesting to see.
I agree. And I feel like that would be something that the Spurs would kind of do,
Mhm.
messaging wise, if that was the case. But like you said, you never know with all those social media reports. Who knows? But I would like to see De'Aaron Fox in San Antonio for the foreseeable future. I
Mhm.
think that him signing a max contract extension with us
It's a good
would
sign.
would indicate that.
Yep.
But you never know in this crazy NBA landscape, I guess you can say, Ethan. But
Right.
last thing for me on De'Aaron, man, I just think we're going to see this season, a lot of the criticisms that people had, I think they're going to be quieted.
Mhm.
And I think they'll just realize, okay, this is why we traded for this guy. And, I think there could be a world, Ethan, where and you mentioned this, where he averages less points and he looks a lot better. And part of that is, like you said, just the fact that he's going to know the team more and he'll be more in our offense, which is just more assist friendly. But I think also another aspect of that is just that the team got better as well.
Mhm.
We didn't have Dylan Harper on the team last year, and this will also be an even better version of Stephon Castle, theoretically. So, um,
Yep.
may average less points, but I think just watching the games, like you said, visually, he's going to look much more comfortable and probably feel like he makes even more of an impact than last season.
Not to put this pressure on him, and they're not exactly the same player, but I'm expecting a Tony Parker-esque role with the Spurs because they're both downhill guys. They use the spin move a lot. They like to finish inside, mid-range jump shot off the pick and roll. Like, I know they're different, but they do play very similar basketball.
Dude, and when I brought up how he was going to could potentially average less points and look better,
Mhm.
I got that idea thinking about like 20-8, 20-9 season stat lines from our boy TP growing
Right.
up. So that's exactly what I was thinking, man. I see the shades. And it's crazy because the next guy I'm going to talk about, or that we're going to bring up, I might make another comparison to a Spurs legend. I don't know if it won't be as the same as this one. But it's like, I swear, we look at guys other than Tony, Manu, and Tim to model our team after, but
For sure.
at some point we also just always go back to him
Yeah. Yes.
too.
100%.
But let's get into the next guy that I have on the roster and on the docket. He is the second most tenured guard on the San Antonio Spurs, Ethan. He's somebody that we have talked about for basically the entire, well, not even basically, for the entire time we've been doing this show. And ironically, if you look there, Ethan, his first season was our first season doing
Mm-hmm.
this show, and he's our age. I feel like we've kind of grown up with Devin in a lot of ways. You could say the same thing with Keldon. And throughout those first 5 seasons that you see down there, Ethan, a lot of what we've said is, hey, look, Devin's improving. Give him some
Mm-hmm.
time. He's young. He's 25 now. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not trying to develop anymore. We're trying to win. So I'll dish it to you, Ethan, because I've said so much about Devin over the years. What are your expectations for him this season? What are your thoughts on his role on the Spurs this year? And just everything you're looking forward to in 2025-26.
Expectations are high for Devin Vassell. I think that goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. As you said, we've literally, as my cat pushes my computer, we have watched him his entire career with the Spurs. And honestly, we've been pretty accurate with our forecast of his career. And if you look at his stats, he has improved every year other than last year. And there's a lot of context there, especially around his injury. But when you drop from 19 to 16 points a game, from 4 assists to 2.9, and then your efficiency drops as well, Jude, and then just the eye test, and he
Yeah.
never looked comfortable, and he was always searching for his spot on the team and how he could best be effective in different rotations. Personally, I think he's most effective off the bench. I think if you give him the keys to the bench unit and let him be the go-to scorer, the go-to facilitator, even because we don't know exactly how Dylan Harper, how ready he will be, but if you play the offense through him off the bench, I think he will be a new Devin Vassell. That's just my own personal opinion. I think we would see maybe not a huge jump from 16 points a game, but better efficiency, especially from three. 36% is not going to cut it for a guy that you drafted as a 3-and-D specialist, right? And he got to a point where he was shooting 39%, and we thought, okay, he's gonna
Yeah.
get to 40 and surpass that. And instead he's back down a little bit. And I understand that maybe you could say volume, bigger role. His volume's decreased too. And unfortunately, when you take a lesser role, when you become more of a 3-and-D guy, we expect more efficiency from you. We're less inclined to forgive
Yep.
a 44% field goal percentage and a 36% from three. So my own personal opinion was to play him off the bench, let him be that go-to guy off the bench, play the offense through him. And if we see an efficiency boost, I think he can be a Manu-esque type player for us, at least in role for the Spurs moving forward. I'm starting
Stole it, man.
if at the same time, Jude, if he comes out and he's starting, if that's what the Spurs want to do, because we're paying him all that money, he is a guy that we drafted 5 years ago, so it's only fair. Give him the chance. We're going to need to see a huge jump in terms of just catch and shoot 3-point percentage, because if he's not hitting his shot from deep, it's really difficult to keep playing him. Because defensively, I think we're more forgiving of Devin,
Yeah.
but he's not a Stephon. He's not a DPOY guy. He's not an all defensive second or first team guy, and that's fine. Like, you can still be a serviceable defender, but as his efficiency declines, it's really hard to play him, especially with the amount of money that we're playing him.
Yeah, yeah, I hear so many things that you were saying there, Ethan. What I'll harp on is just him last year. You can mention the stat decreases and all that stuff, but you could also make the argument that they're just marginal too.
Mhm.
And then you bring in all of the context with, oh, he's figuring out his role, or like you said, there's the injury and everything. But the bigger thing for me, I bring that up to say, like, you can make a counter argument for that. What you
Mhm.
can't make a counter argument for is the eye test, like you mentioned. Um, it just looks like he couldn't find his place. You know what I'm saying? And when
100%.
and when you think about Wemby's first year, he was almost like the main ball handler in pick and rolls with Wemby. And then
Mhm.
this season, not only do you have Stephon who comes in, but then in the middle of the year, you have De'Aaron Fox who's added to the roster. So those guys end up kind of becoming the two main ball handlers. And like you said, he becomes more of an off-ball player. Now, especially in this bench role that you're mentioning, as much as Dylan Harper would be there, I think he would 100% have some opportunities for on ball creation and ball handling and bringing the ball up the floor. But regardless of if he's in the starting lineup or off the bench, catch and shoot consistency is the first thing I have written down on my notes when it
Mhm.
comes to Devin Vassell. I really believe he has the ability to do it, dude. I think he has all of the physical tools. I think he has a good shot. but can he perform under pressure? Can he perform, when the lights are turned on? That's really what it comes down to. And we've mentioned this for years. We were so forgiving. There were so many people over the years that were coming and yelling at us and telling us he sucks, and we're like, hey, just give him some time. He's a super young player. But now that we're here when he's 25 and the Spurs are trying to win with Wemby, and it's very obvious with the way that we've built the roster that that's going to be the case. And the fact that, let me pull this up 1 second. Pulling up the salaries here. He is the second highest paid San Antonio Spur behind De'Aaron Fox this season at $27 million, like by $10 million, or I guess you got Harrison Barnes there at $19 million. So by $8 million, you know what I mean? He is the second highest paid Spur. He, like I said, Ethan, we've kind of grown up with him. He's 25 now. He's got to make it happen. I think, like I said, I believe he has the ability to do it, but are you going to execute? And unfortunately, that's just kind of what it comes down to with that this year. But just to rattle off a couple other things on Devin here, finding a role on and off the ball offensively. Like I said, I think on the ball, we know what that can be. If he's playing off the bench, he'll have more opportunities. Regardless of if he's in the starting lineup or the bench, like I mentioned earlier, he's going to need to start hitting shots more consistently, whether he's playing next to Steph and De'Aaron or Dylan Harper. Those are all point guards, theoretically. Not Steph as much, but y'all get the point. And then on the defensive end of the ball, I haven't mentioned this, just defensive consistency. I feel like when I think about Devin's defense, I feel like the one-on-one possessions that I watched, they're like 50-50. Sometimes he'd get beat off the dribble or he'd just get bullied physically a little bit. But also there were times that I saw him trail guys or stay in front of them and swat them at the rim. I really saw a couple, like the rim swat specifically showed up later in the season, and that was all effort from Devin. You know what I mean? So you can criticize other things, but he's trying out there. It's not like he's just like, I don't care on defense. So again, that's why it's a consistency thing. And again, I think he has the physical tools in that like on ball, lateral movement situation to make it happen. And that's really where I think he can get better. Maybe a little bit of like getting lost in rotations as well. That's something else that maybe pops up in my mind. He misses a backdoor cut or something, but there's also possessions that stick out in my mind where he kind of clamps people up like Gary Payton too. So again, it's seeing that consistently. And I'm not asking him, to go out there and hold SGA to 5 of 19. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In fact, I'm honestly not going to expect him to really get a stop in a one-on-one with a guy like SGA. But the rest of the league, the rest of those non-elite ball handlers, just those average to above average, guards. If he can, play solid defense and above average defense against them, that's kind of my standard for Devin. And then the last thing I had written down, and this ties into consistency, is again, like you said, it's efficiency. When your shots decrease, your efficiency matters more, and it's going to be amplified more, unfortunately. And it sucks because with more shots, you actually get a better sample size, of what it looks like. But now that he's in the position that he's in, and the roster is built the way that it is, it just kind of is what it is. You know what I mean? There's no more excuses. But the last thing I had written down was when Dev is on. Like when he's on, he's a 20 piece waiting to happen. Easy. And that's why the last thing I had written down was low key ... kind of want him in a Manu-esque role. And I don't want to compare him to Manu because Manu's one of one. I got his jersey. Okay, there we go. Sometimes looking at the camera, it's not right. But I got his jersey right up here. He's my favorite player. I grew up with him. Like, I don't want to disrespect him. You know what I'm saying? And everything he's done. But dude, if Devin can figure it out, as a six man, that's what he is. He's a microwave scorer who brings energy, juice off the dribble, step back jumpers that are exciting for the crowd. We see him get dunked sometimes. Like I said, we've even seen flashes, of exciting, trailing, swats at the rim that'll bring energy to the crowd. That reminds me of Manu. You know what I'm saying? And again, Devin's got so much work before he's even in the conversation with a guy like Manu. But there's a lot of things in his game where I can kind of see it. Kind of like you were saying with Tony Parker and De'Aaron.
Only other thing I'll say, as a leader and in the guy in the locker room, I think he's there. Maybe not at Manu level, but I think he's important to the team. So I will give him credit there. But I agree with everything that you said, especially defensive points. Very good points.
Any final thoughts on Dev before we move on?
No, sir. Good luck, my friend. I hope you make it.
Dev, let me pull up this roster again, dude. Like, because if Devin Vassell is on, if we can get a solid year for Devin Vassell where he just really fits in the role and everything meshes, dude, we've got a guard rotation of De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, and Devin Vassell. Like I said, if Devin Vassell's on, dude, you can make an argument those are all starting level NBA guards.
1,000%.
Which again goes to the depth piece. So I really want it to work out for Devin, because if that's the case, it's going to be better for the Spurs overall too, in our team and our depth.
Yes, sir.
But let's move on to some of the young guns here, Ethan. Let's talk about the rookie of the year. Where is he? Oh my goodness, I scrolled past him. How could I do it? Stephon Castle, going into his sophomore year, Ethan, with the San Antonio Spurs. What are your expectations for the reigning Roy?
Super high, because let's be honest, he's probably reason number one we're being so hard on Devin Vassell, and probably reason number one that Devin Vassell looks kind of lost in terms of where he's supposed to be and what his role is on the team. Because I think when we drafted this young man, we thought he was going to be just a defensive stopper, and that's pretty much it, Jude, right? Like, we had high expectations for his career, but immediate impact was
Right.
just defensive guy. He came in and was way more than that, obviously. At first, it was mostly just an athletic finisher that had clear playmaking potential. And then he became a guy that could score off the dribble. And then his playmaking slowly got ironed out. Then his jump shot started to look a lot better. And before you know it, he's averaging 15 and 4 a night as a rookie on pretty efficient shooting. Obviously, three-point percentage only 28%. But field goal percentage 43%. I mean, Devin was 44 and got way more shots. But what really separated him in my eyes, you, was just the confidence that he played with, and playing so extremely under controlled and skillful for a guy so young. Because we see his explosive athleticism, and you think maybe he's going to rely on that for a couple of years, but he clearly is extremely skilled. And you see that with his hesitation layups that he does, takes the half a step and slows down, then lays it up.
The D-cell.
Yeah, he just knows how to play basketball, dude. He is a basketball player. It's hard to pigeonhole him as a shooting guard or a point guard, because he can really play 1, 2, or 3. He can guard a couple fours. He just understands what it takes to win games. So what I'm expecting, or what I'm hoping from him for next year, catch and shoot efficiency. That's really it. Because if he can maintain what he can do as a ball handler, as a playmaker, as a finisher at the rim, and as a defender, and then just get to 33, 35% from deep, and just be respectable from deep, like you have to guard him, you can't leave him alone, then it just completely opens up the offense for us, and it opens up his individual game as well. Because now suddenly he's getting guys jumping at his pump fake, and he's got a clear lane, and he's got a
Oh
40+ inch
man.
vertical. You know what I'm saying, Jude? And
Yes.
his pick and roll playmaking with Wemby was also something that was just immediately, like, it clicked, and it was there. And I don't know who deserves credit for that. Was it UConn? Was it Pop? Was it Wemby, or was it Chris Paul? Who knows? Maybe it's just Stephon. Maybe he's just that good. But expectations are through the roof, and honestly, I think that he will likely just surpass them, Jude.
Yeah, man. There's so much that I could touch on there, but what I'll start with is what I had written down, which is a sophomore jump, not a sophomore slump.
Right.
The other thing I had written down was shooting improvements, mainly from three, because we saw a lot of shades of the mid-range jumper last season.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I want to mention on his shooting, and we mentioned this in our episode with Lou, and also just at nauseum, whenever we talked about Steph at the end of the year, as much as it wasn't a crazy great percentage, it was an improved percentage. Like, you saw him get better throughout the year. So it doesn't have to be a giant improvement, but if we can just have incremental improvements over time, that's going to lead to what you're talking about, where people are jumping on pump fakes and they don't know how to guard him. Stephon Castle makes me forget about Dylan Harper.
That's saying something.
Dude, like, he's the number 2 pick. Yeah, like that. I was thinking about that when I was just, doing the order of how we were going to do this. And, it kind of just turned into, like, tenure for the most guys. You're going to get rotation, and at the end, we'll talk about the third stringers and our two-way guys. But like genuinely, I feel like I haven't been thinking about Dylan Harper enough, and that probably has to do that you have another guard here on Stephon Castle, who just was the rookie of the year, also a top 5
Mm-hmm.
pick, who surpassed expectations. But to get back to what I want to see from him this year, Ethan, another physical level. Obviously, we saw his physicality look. Winky agrees. Winky's like, I want to give you some love in here,
Big
Ethan.
Steph fan.
I'm a big fan of Steph's physicality, so I got to give you a hug right now. But again, when it comes to Stephon Castle, man, he was able to really just, like I said, I mentioned earlier how I want to see De'Aaron put his chest into guys. Stephon was doing that from before the whistle even blew.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And we saw that, when he's driving to the rim, when he's on defense. And he's still so young. Like, he was 19 for the most of last season. Like, I'm thinking about what Stephon's going to look like physically when he's 25, dude. I mean, this dude's going to be a beast. He's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
presence on the floor. He already is. So, long story short, with another year of physical development in an NBA training program, I'm excited to see him impose that on our opponents throughout the season, offensively and defensively. Continued playmaking development. Obviously, we saw so many flashes of that last season. You mentioned the pick and roll with Wemby. I mean, there's so many times where, like you mentioned the D-cell, near the basket. I don't know the game, but I just can picture it in my head. I can think of a D-cell point where he's on the left wing and he throws like a no-look pass to a shooter in the right corner and they
Yep,
drain it. And see, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even though we can't picture the game, you're like, I know that play
I
because we
do.
watched Stephon Castle and he did it multiple times, man. And so again, obviously, starting at a very good place, but if he can continue to improve that only just will, obviously make him a better combo guard, but increase his positional versatility as well. And that's the last thing that I said, just continuing to see that. But man, I think you hit the nail on the head. He's just a basketball player. Last year, we tried to pigeonhole him into maybe being a point guard. And obviously that's what he was in high school. And I think that is what he likes. Who doesn't like having the ball in their hands? But I think what UConn proved, as well as what last season in San Antonio proved, is that he can play 1 through 3 and he can do all pretty effectively. And a lot of his skills, you're still going to see those regardless of the position that he's playing. Like, even if he's playing the 3, you can still see his playmaking. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Even if he's playing the 1, you can still see a little bit of off ball playing, or off ball cuts or something like that. So man, he's just such a versatile player in so many different ways. And yeah, I mean, the main thing is just avoiding that sophomore slump, which, I think most rookies of the years, I'm sure there's some example that you can point to, but a lot of the greats is what I'm getting at, that they don't have that. And I don't want to, call Stephon necessarily a great as of right now, because I don't want to get too over my head. But dude, I really do feel like the sky's the limit for him.
I would agree. Only other negative that I forgot to mention that I want to make sure we mention because
Yeah.
someone will bring it up, clean up the turnovers, obviously. Hopefully that just improves naturally because he understands the system now, full offseason under his belt. But turnovers need to be cleaned up.
Yeah. You could say free throw percentage as
Yep,
well.
free throw percentage. Good point.
But man, there's just, when I think about Steph's game last year, dude, there's really not that much to criticize other than shooting.
It got to the point, Jude, where I was most confident in the team when he had the ball. Like, especially when Wemby was hurt.
Yeah.
And even we still had De'Aaron and Devin was playing, and I was like, get the ball to Steph, dude. Like, even if he was like 1 for 7 from deep, like let him have it because he's pretty clutch and always confident in himself and what he's doing. So I'm through the moon over this guy.
Or like we were mentioning, he's going to get a good look for somebody else, even if his
Mm-hmm.
shot's not falling.
100%.
Has a great feel for the game. I think that
Yes.
ties into your basketball player point. But let's move on to our number 2 pick, Ethan. We're not going to forget about him this time. Where is he? Dylan Harper, the Lampetarian. I'm just going to keep introducing him as that from now on. And we have no stats or information available because he technically has no NBA stats. I thought they'd have his Rutgers stuff on here. I probably needed to go to that one. But regardless, we got him on the screen here, Ethan. we'll have to see, what happens with him in preseason, or if he's ready for the regular season with the surgery that he got recently on his thumb. But I will say the Spurs did post a couple of videos of the team traveling to Austin, and I didn't even see like a brace on his thumb. So even if he is out for the season opener, it's not going to be severe. It's not going to be super long. But with that in mind, as much as we may not get to see him in preseason or maybe at the beginning of the season, Ethan, what are your expectations for this year's Rookie of the Year candidate for the San Antonio Spurs?
Obviously, you see the explosiveness. He's got the name. He's got the heritage. He's the second overall pick. Any other draft, maybe he might be the number one overall pick. Uh, Averaged 19-4 for Rutgers last year. Dude, I'm thinking he's gonna average 15-5
Ooh, okay.
because we see the explosiveness, but he has so much skill and he plays so controlled as well. And we know that he is a more than capable scorer. I think it will immediately translate to the NBA. Obviously, where his difficulties are going to be is the speed of the game at first. Playmaking might take a little bit longer than anticipated, I would imagine. But the biggest one for me is specific to the Spurs because there are so many guards, just finding a place, finding his role, figuring out where he's most effective. Um, and I think he can do it for sure, but I'm also going to keep an eye on how effective is he when he doesn't have the ball. Because I think he's most effective as a primary ball handler. But we have De'Aaron, we have Steph. Even if you play Devin off the bench, we both just kind of agreed
Right.
Devin probably needs the ball in his hands off the bench. So is he going to continue to be effective without the ball? Something to keep an eye on. But I have high expectations, dude. I'm going to go 15 points, 5 assists. And I don't think he's a slouch on defense either. I'm thinking that he will be a very, very solid, at least above average defender on day one.
Heard, man. I don't think 15-5 is crazy, man. And that was the whole point I was making about Stephon Castle, dude. He makes you forget, and as well as De'Aaron Fox coming in, and this kind of feeling like this is our first real look at De'Aaron after what we saw last year, which we already went over. And then Devin, with kind of our connection to him, he's an intriguing storyline as well. And then you just have the number 2 pick down here that we haven't even talked about.
Yep.
So I am so excited, man. This is what I wrote down. I'm interested to see how the jumper fares. I'm interested to see where the defense is at on and off the ball. And the reason that I framed those in the way that I did is because of just the circumstances at Rutgers. If you guys go listen to our episode with Lou, where we did a whole draft breakdown on a ton of different prospects, he mentioned how, just the coaching there was really rough. It was really only him and Ace Bailey that were like, real like Power 5 players that were on that roster. And they were in the Big Ten, which is a very competitive, legit basketball conference. So there were a lot of things there that like kind of muddied the waters whenever it comes to evals. Obviously, he was still kind of regarded as the consensus, number 2 guy behind Cooper Flagg. So everybody agreed that there was a lot of things going on at Rutgers that wasn't necessarily his fault. But regardless of that being the case, Ethan, with that being the case, I feel like we didn't get, a completely accurate look at exactly where everything's at. So like I said, I'm interested to see where the jumper is. We've got the stats from last year, but we've also got that he was 50%, on open threes as well. We saw the 1 for 5 game in Summer League. Again, that's just Summer League. It's only 2 games. I thought the shot looked good. It just didn't go down. Those were also the first couple games that he played since March. So it's like, when he's actually been practicing and knows his teammates and has more talent around him, maybe the shot falls more, or maybe it is something that he has to get better at. But again, only the season will tell that. And then defensively, I thought we saw a lot of flashes in Summer League of his defensive IQ, effort, even like crashing on a double team smartly, on a guy at the rim, as well as just, physical on ball defense. But again, those are just Summer League guys. What's that going to look like against, real NBA competition and rotation players? Obviously, I hope it looks just as good, but we'll have to see how that happens. And then the other thing I have written down is how fast will his impact be felt as a number 2 pick? You mentioned how with Steph, it kind of felt like it was almost just immediate and it was natural. Like the Spurs fan base was like, oh my gosh, this dude, like, look at what he's doing. Like he's taking everybody's attention and he's also taking, other players from other teams' attention as well. It wasn't just the Spurs fans noticing this. Other teams' players, were noticing that as well. with all of the different talks that Steph had with all the different legends, in post games last year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm interested to see kind of like, not to use a Gen Z term, man, but I will. What is his aura going to be like? You know what I mean? But genuinely,
Mm-hmm.
like, what is his presence on the court going to feel like? Because this isn't just, a lottery pick. You know what I'm saying? And I don't even want to throw that away because there's some lottery picks that end up being elite. And I'm really excited about Carter Bryant. But you get what I'm saying. He is a
Mm-hmm.
number 2 pick. What's he going to feel like whenever it comes to his presence on the floor? And then to wrap all this up, playmaking ability, on ball creation, the pick and roll and the pick and pop game, dribble drives, step back middies, acrobatic layups, pace pushing, his combination of athleticism and skill, just all of that being added to the team, and specifically the bench unit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to see what that looks like, especially if he's playing next to not just a guy like Keldon. Not that Keldon's the difference, but if he's playing next to Devin and Keldon, like 2 experienced dudes, like that could be a unit with a lot of juice if everybody gels.
1,000%. The way I looked at it, Jude, is like he's replacing 2 people. Really, he's replacing Chris Paul and Trey Jones.
That's a
Is
good
he
point.
is he an improvement over Chris Paul and Trey Jones last year, given the
Right.
context?
Yeah, 100%.
I'm gonna say
Love
yes.
love you, Chris Paul. On the career, obviously that's a different discussion, but in comparison to last year.
Yes, versus last year, I think he's a better scorer. I think he's a better defender. We'll see about the shooting, like you said, but I think I'm high on his shot. Um, just super excited about what he's going to bring to the team.
Yeah, man. Me too. Any final thoughts on Dylan?
No, sir, that's it.
Alrighty, man. Well, let's jump into these last 3 guys here. These definitely won't be as in depth of breakdowns, except for one. We're gonna go for 30 minutes on David Jones-Garcia.
Hell yeah.
Just kidding. We will talk about David Jones-Garcia though. But let's start off with Jordan McLaughlin. Ethan, I mentioned him last episode, and as much as it does just kind of seem like, oh, he's our 3rd string point guard. Again, I don't mean to harp on this ad nauseum, but he is a guy who has legitimate backup rotation minutes in a playoff series with Minnesota. You saw last year, in the game. Let me pull up his game log here. Was it the last game he played? No, it wasn't. I guess it was I'm thinking of this game right here, the Golden State game, where he went 3 for 4. I thought he had a game with 11 points where he went 4 for 4, but I'm getting too caught up on the weeds on these Jordan McLaughlin game logs. The point is he can come in and he's a pretty solid shooter. And he also can come in and know how to competently run an offense as a veteran at 29 years old. So what are your thoughts on Jordan McLaughlin as the 3rd string point guard, Ethan?
Veteran safety guy. I think even in limited minutes last year, you could clearly see that he is an elite 3-point shooter. Minimal attempts. Obviously, he's only 6 feet tall. But you got to think that the guard room is a logjam anyway. The likelihood that he gets meaningful time is probably slim to none. But push comes to shove, we're in a pinch. We need somebody to bring the rock up the floor. I'm totally fine with Jordan McLaughlin.
Here's the bottom line, man. And I hate to put it this way, because shout out to Blake Wesley. We taught, I know he was your boy, but I liked him too, man. I really think he does have some defensive potential. And if he can get the offense together, I think he can be a solid backup defensive guard.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of that, Ethan, if we're just being objective here, Jordan McLaughlin is 100%, an upgrade over Blake Wesley. If we're in a situation where we need to, choose to play between one or two of them, unequivocally, it would be Jordan McLaughlin in this scenario where now we're trying to get wins.
Yeah. And the games where it matters, 1,000%.
So that's all I got on Jordan McLaughlin. We will move on to another guard who is on a 1-year contract in San Antonio. So that's another thing about most of these 3rd stringers. Basically, everybody except for Carter Bryant and Julian Champagnie is on a 1-year deal. And the other guy who is on a 1-year deal, where is he? I'm looking for Lindy Waters. There you are, all the way down here. Lindy Waters III, 28 years old. Played for our guy, or former Spur, technically, Sam Presti, was kind of a diamond in the rough. Honestly, really, you could kind of think of him as kind of like the Thunder's Champagnie over the past couple years, but obviously the Thunder were pushing for a finals, so
Mm-hmm.
he didn't really get playing time. But again, a 3-and-D guy. mainly, an off-ball three-point shooter for the most part on offense. And I'm not going to say he's a world beater defensively, but he's not horrible either. And again, this will be the last thing I'll say here. Everything that we wanted Malachi to do consistently, I think Lindy Waters, kind of already has in his game. And the things that, maybe like some of the on ball creation that Malachi had that he doesn't, we're not in a need as much of, on top of, the development piece, like we've mentioned with him being older.
Yeah, he comes from a lot of really good systems. OKC, Golden State, even Detroit last year, they were a very good
Yep.
team. Um, I'm looking at the season. It wasn't his last season, but his last season with, where is it? Golden State. So 2 seasons ago,
Yes.
17 minutes a game, played 38 games, averaged 5 points, 33% shooting. Like, he's just a 3 and D guy, Jude, that's not going to get in anybody's way. And like I said, could be another plug and play guy that the Spurs find as a diamond in the rough that maybe develops into someone similar, uh, at least in role to Julian Champagnie. I think he's older than Julian. Obviously, he's kind of probably almost to his peak, but in terms of what we can do with him, how we can utilize him, probably similar to Julian when we first acquired him from the Blue Coats.
The Delaware Blue Coats, man. So many Spurs were made on
Hmm.
that roster.
Yes, they were.
But let's go down to David Jones-Garcia, man. Honestly, this is who I'm most excited about out of everybody that we just talked about. Shout out to Lindy and our guy Jordan McLaughlin as well. But kind of part of the reason that I mentioned both of them being on 1 year deals, dude, is if David Jones-Garcia goes off this year, similarly to he did in the summer league, as well as what he showed with the Salt Lake City Stars last season in the G League, I think he could definitely be a candidate for one of those other guard spots going into next season. Obviously, he was the star of summer league. What are you expecting to see from him in Austin, and then maybe even some potential spot minutes in San Antonio?
Dude, I'm gonna need some MVP caliber game from him in Austin. This guy, I'm not looking at stats for him right now. All I know is that when summer league started, he was by far and away the most entertaining player the entire time for every team. I don't care who they were. Over Cooper Flag, over Dylan Harper, it was David Jones Garcia. It was his shot creating, it was his jump, his 3 point shot, and just the smoothness and the confidence that he played with was overwhelming for me at 23 years old. And in MVP stats is what I'm expecting in Austin, but he gets 41 games as a two-way player with San Antonio, Jude. I don't want those 41 games, if he even gets to all of them. I don't want them to be 2 minutes in garbage time. I want to see this guy actually get some meaningful time. You know what I mean? I need him to get 15 to 20 minutes when he plays one of these days. Hopefully not because of injury. Hopefully because we're so good we can rest players. But um, I think he has some legitimate diamond in the rough type potential that could be impactful for, if not us, somebody else down the road, because he's got a lot of stuff to his game.
Yeah, he really has the blueprint, for a Julian Champagnie, just in the sense that he can build out a long-term roster spot on the Spurs after starting out with a two-way contract, man. Like you mentioned, I'm just so excited to see what he does in Austin. And I agree, man. Hopefully the Spurs are in a scenario where like they can have a night where they have the luxury to rest a De'Aaron Fox. And maybe that's a night where we could see him running with the second unit. But the other thing I'm thinking about is, dang it, Dylan Harper. But in that
Mhm.
scenario, Dylan Harper would be starting. So that actually, we would get to see that. We would get to see that. I got to use my big brain there. Um, but yeah, man, you pretty much said everything. His off the dribble creation, the way that he took over games, the way that he controlled the pace of games,
Mhm.
his efficiency, his off the dribble shooting, his actual jump shot. I mean, you saw some physicality from him on defense as well. He just totally took over games in the summer league. The G League and the summer league are very different than the NBA. Um, but I don't know, dude. Just what I saw from him this year, I'm gonna come out and I'm gonna make a prediction, Ethan. I'm gonna say that next year he's on the actual roster. I'm gonna say it before this season, even before we see everything that he does this year. I just what I saw from him this past season, or this past summer league season, I should say. It just gives me a lot of confidence, dude. I think, like you said, I think this guy's got a lot of potential, and I think we found a diamond in the rough, man.
I would not be mad at that. That's how great of a summer league it was for him that we're willing to give him a long-term contract today
Yeah.
without seeing a single minute in the real NBA. So, when your time is up, you better play well because David Jones-Garcia has earned the respect of SSPN. That's hard to come by, Jude.
Well, and man, just again, imagine seeing a Jones-Garcia, seeing a Garcia on the back of a
Oh
Spurs
my
jersey.
goodness.
Oh my!
Number one selling jersey in a heartbeat.
And if he's like the sixth man, like that's perfect. If it's like Jones-Garcia's coming in, let's go, dude. Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
let's get the churros, man. I'm ready.
Right on.
We appreciate you guys for hanging out with us today and talking Spurs, going over all the guards and everything like that. Tell us in the comments your thoughts on everybody that we went over today. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. You can also turn on the notification bell, stay updated with our posts tab on the channel to stay updated with everything. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. We'll be coming out with more position breakdowns over the next 2 weeks. We'll have the timestamps in here. And if you just want to go individually with some of these guys, we'll be dropping clips for every single in-depth breakdown for each player on the roster. So again, we appreciate y'all. We'll catch you guys in the next one. And go Spurs, go!